life-giving trees that flow in the breeze, giving us the air to breathe, came from the seeds that sons and daughters had sown, passing down histories through stories, genes, and bones. Hear the whispers of the past, dictate your prologue, a generational griot through which memories are prolonged. So we reach down like nourishing waters to seek truths, except we receive nourishment when we're digging the roots.
All right, everybody. We had a nice little musical interlude there. That's what happens when you select the wrong song in iTunes to start the show. But regardless, James said he was jamming to Childish Gambino. There's nothing wrong with that. But hello, I'm Nika Smith. Tonight is August 22nd, 2017. I'm here with your next iteration of BlackProGen Live. We're so grateful you all would spend your evening tonight with us to talk genealogy and family history research. And we've got a lot of content and stuff to get to this evening. But before we get started, just want to handle some housekeeping. Be sure to join the conversation with us on Twitter. Tweet us at BlackProGen. Also, hashtag your comments with BlackProGen. Maybe there's something we said during the episode, or maybe there's something that you don't necessarily think was right, or maybe you have some feedback, whatever it is. Be sure to tweet us. Also, follow us on Twitter. And then, of course, throughout whatever time you're spending, maybe you see some news or something you think we'd be interested in, or maybe a blog post, podcast, whatever. Be sure to hashtag your tweets BlackProGen so we can make sure that we see them. Tonight's subject matter is people of color in Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, and Missouri. The Midwest was a haven for the formerly enslaved during Reconstruction, and especially after the rise of Jim Crow. Learn about resources, record sets, and more for research in Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, and Missouri. That's tonight's episode of BlackProGen Live. Want to remind you to get the latest and greatest from BlackProGen in your inbox. Subscribe to the Lowdown today. Check the description of this recording and any BlackProGen Live episode for the link. And if you subscribe, that will give you the ability to get our collective aggregated feed of blogs, podcasts, and more from the panel and friends of BlackProGen Live. Last housekeeping of the night. Don't want to miss another show? Be sure to set your reminders. Have you been like, oh man, I can't believe I missed that episode. I need reminders. Well, be sure to set them. All you need to do is head to my YouTube page and click set reminder under the episodes you're interested in, or simply subscribe to the channel and you'll get a reminder each and every time I go live or post anything. All right, before we get started this evening with the subject matter at hand, let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. We'll go with the one that's the furthest north. That would be Teresa Vega.
Hi, Teresa Vega, representing New York City, and I am with Radiant Roots, Bariqua Branches.
All right, let's go down the eastern seaboard to Virginia, Charlottesville, that is, a woman who was safe in her own home, not at the city council meeting or at the statue.
That would be Shelley Murphy, aka Family Tree Girl. I am safe.
She is safe in her home, but she is definitely in
I'll
Charlottesville.
Be there tomorrow.
She'll be there tomorrow. All right. All right. Going further down south, we'll hit James Morgan.
I'm actually north of Miss Dr. Shelley Murphy.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
I'm actually north. But good evening, everybody. I'm James Morgan, and I'm coming to you from right outside the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and it's always a pleasure to be here.
All right, moving further down the eastern seaboard, we'll hit Florida or potentially South Carolina for Tony Carrier.
Hi, Jen friends. I'm Tony Carrier from Low Country Africana and also the Center for Family History at the International African American Museum. And I would like to urge you to follow our new website, cfh.iaamuseum.org.
All right, and we're going to go inland. I guess I would be next. If we're going to go in the opposite direction, we're taking a trip down and we're going to go opposite direction. I'm Nika Smith here in dark West Tennessee. We're going to actually, we had somebody who made us detour. Perhaps we forgot our underpants or our deodorant at home, and we had to go back to Maryland. So that means, Angela, you're up next.
Hello, everybody. Coming from Maryland. All I heard. Yeah, so I'm just saying hello.
We had made our way down the eastern seaboard, starting with Teresa, and we had gone down to Maryland and Virginia, and then we go to Florida, and then we were moving in, but we figured out that we had left something at home. We had to go back to Maryland in order to go and get you.
Oh my gosh.
Nika, next time, somebody else is driving next time. Your GPS is broken. Your GPS is broken.
But you basically said if she forgot her deodorant, she could have went and bought some more. Is basically what you said.
Right.
But what if it's a specific kind that she really likes?
They sell it wherever we're going. They sell it wherever you're going.
Oh my Lord! How do you know? How do you know everybody has Toms? Okay. Anywho, last but not least, actually no. Let's see. True would be next after me.
Yeah, I'm here in Kentucky at Fort Knox, everyone. It's me, True Lewis of My True Roots. So I'm glad to be here. It's been a long summer and we're back again.
Absolutely, absolutely. She's got new gray walls like me.
Yeah, I'm in the new house.
In the house. She's in a new house. She's got new house, new walls, all sorts of stuff. All right. And last but not least, of course, we've got Linda Sims.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Sims, coming from Missouri.
All right. And we've got lots of chatters in our chat room. We're going to say hello to those folks. Tanya Sanders, thanks so much for joining us. Denise Muhammad, who's here each and every time we broadcast. Kim Allen, we've got Khalifa. We've got, let's see, Valerie List join us, including Erlen Sterling as well. So thank you for joining us for this evening's episode of BlackProGen Live. So tonight's topic, we're talking about states that people probably are like, why are we having a conversation about people of color in these locations? They're like, why? Like, couldn't we have covered Florida? Couldn't we have covered Texas? Why on earth is it important for us to talk about Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Minnesota when it comes to people of color?
Because we are there.
Number one answer. She's got it. Okay, so besides the obvious, the fact that we're there, what are the reasons? Why do you think people overlook these locations? Do you think it's because maybe historically they've been perceived as being not as people of color friendly or diverse, or?
I would say that may be part of it, but I also think that from what I've studied on that area, and I'm not from there, I don't have relatives there, but I've done quite a bit of study in this area actually. I think that it's kind of viewed more as a transitory region of the country to some extent. Like, it's not a place, not to say you don't have people who have roots there, but it's a place where it's like you have people from the Deep South going there, and then they end up going to California or elsewhere. And you also have people coming from Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, also going there, and then later generations sometimes spreading out and going further west or whatever. So it's kind of just think about the name, the Midwest. It can't be its own region. It's got to be in relation to something else. So, but the history there is just as important, and I'm looking forward to talking about it tonight, especially since I just got back from there a few weeks ago.
Yes, both of us have gotten back. We both took trips to Kansas this year.
Absolutely.
Linda, what were you going to add?
I was just going to say, I live here, but my concentration is the Deep South. And so, like my family didn't come here to the mid-40s. So it wasn't my area of concentration. And so people coming up from the South, this was a stopping place, Missouri, as they continued on.
That's also the same with Iowa. And jobs, occupation specifically, and people going per se north, even though, Midwest, but it's still north. But I think jobs was a big reason that people of color went into those states.
Right.
Absolutely. I can definitely say with my experience in my own family, I had somebody that ended up in Minnesota, somebody that ended up in Missouri, someone that ended up in Iowa and on one side, and the other side was Kansas. So
Nebraska, we left them out.
We did
They
leave
had
them
black
out.
folks there too.
We did leave them out. I know. They're just like they're gonna hate us along with the Florida people and the Texas people because we haven't covered
There
those.
was communities of color in Nebraska. So
There
when we do
were.
talk about them, it'd be very
Still are.
interesting.
Yeah, there still are. Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. And same
Yes.
thing as Utah, right? If we're going to
Yes.
cover Nebraska, we probably have to hit up Idaho and,
Yes.
you know, maybe that's a show for next year.
Boise, Wyoming, Casper, absolutely. Black
Absolutely.
communities
Absolutely.
right there.
Absolutely.
Migrations, jobs, things changed.
Yes. Yes. So I would say if you want us to talk about Nebraska, Idaho, Utah, African American communities, people of color communities that were in those locations or states, be sure to let us know. You know, tweet us, hashtag us, whatever. Let us know that you'd like for us to talk about those locations. So, all right, let's jump right in. So, let's talk about. We'll just go in alphabetical order for once. Let's talk about Iowa. You know, what is sort of the history of people of color that are living in Iowa? I know in my experience, I had a grand uncle who left, you know, Louisiana, and that was the first place he stopped was in Iowa before he went to Chicago. He was in Davenport. Why what type of why is Iowa? Why would Iowa be critical in terms of research for people of color?
Well, for my
During,
family, it was, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
For my family, it was coal mining. They were black coal miners, and they came up from the South, first went into Illinois, and then they went into Iowa, and they settled in Buxton about 1910, or 1905 to 1910, they entered in, and to the coal mining community of Buxton. This is very interesting, and I shared some links on it, because Buxton had black businesses, they had black attorneys, black doctors, black bankers, and it was a whole community built around.
Yes.
Now, there was black and white. There's a lot of narrative type stories that are out that talks about Buxton and then also the shutting down of it. But what was there, they didn't seem to have racial issues, black and white, even because there was white miners there also. And that's highlighted. Actually, Iowa has an African American museum, and very interesting and fabulous exhibits. And I posted that, and I'll post that in the chat for you, Nika, to share, because it's very interesting, and they have fabulous exhibits. There's books on Buxton and things like that. But it's called the African American Museum of Iowa. So I'm gonna put this in
I'll
here.
I'll pull up the thread so I've got access to it. Is there any relation to Buxton in Canada? Do you know?
No,
I don't think so.
That is in Ontario. You're thinking of Ontario, but Buxton, Iowa was a mining town.
Right.
And they did have a very sizable African-American community. And as Buxton, the mining town, began to close down, many people drifted to the nearest big city, which was Des Moines, and which is how sort of Des Moines' black population began to expand a bit. But there is an awful lot written about Buxton, and there are some narratives that some of the black miners were brought in to break up the strikes. I don't know if that's really true or not. But yes, I mean, Buxton is immediately what comes to mind. But now the community is thriving in Des Moines. There has been a population, still is a population, very much so. And kind of like, you know, Omaha and Lincoln and some of the other states in what we call the Great Plains. But yeah.
There was actually a migration out of Charlottesville, Virginia, up to Buxton.
Really?
Yep. Yeah.
Really? What was the motivation, do you think?
Jobs, mining.
Okay. Mining jobs. Okay,
Yeah.
so did
they went from Charlottesville to Augusta County and then on up to Buxton.
So was it that the jobs sort of evaporated in Charlottesville and then that's why they left, or was it just opportunity?
I've never seen why. I have just seen, you know, from reading local history information, and there was links to family members that all went up around a certain time. And because Buxton kind of was hot from 1895 to 1927 as far as that mining activity. And my folks came out of Fulton County, Illinois to Buxton, which was another mining area. So I don't know what caused them to move. And Tim Pinnick is a gentleman, if people in the chat room don't know, but he has a white website called the Black Coal Miners, and he has extensive research and history on the miners and keeps a database of the Black miners throughout pretty much wherever there was mines at and African Americans. So they could visit his website also.
All right, and just making sure everyone sees this. This is what Shelley was referring to, which was the African American Museum of Iowa, which has a website. Looks like they have a gala coming up on September 7th. So if you have a little bit of cash to throw around, be sure to reserve your ticket today. Maybe you want to head on over there. And they've got a number of different little spots on their website. Of course, membership, donating information, also volunteering to be part of their team. They've got education section, different exhibits. We'll click on one of these just to kind of show you what's there. Ooh, trace Iowa's African-American history from its origins in Western Africa to the present through slavery, the Civil War of the Underground Railroad, segregation, and the Civil Rights Movement at the African-American Museum of Iowa's permanent exhibit, Endless Possibilities. And so they've got a lunch counter. Look at this, you guys. This is not little. This is not a little diddly museum here. We've got some stuff, y'all. We've got some stuff.
I just posted for you, Nika, Tim Pinnick's Black Coal Miners Heritage.net site.
Okay, I'll bring that up.
Yeah, because if people, he's a great contact.
Okay, and this is Tim's
site.
Okay, most folks know him from newspapers. He presents on newspapers quite a bit, but he's got his looks like his methodology for let's see, what is this? He's got APG stuff, black coal. Let's see, we've got coal miner book.
Yeah.
And ordering information for that. So yeah, I would definitely say if you've got some connections to this particular type of research, feel free to reach out to Tim. All right, so let's move forward to Kansas. Now, of course, me and James can spend the next 10 years talking about Kansas. Since we both went there this year and had an amazing experience researching in Kansas. But why is research in Kansas critical, James?
I can tell you why. For me, Black folks up there had guns, and they knew how to use them.
Well, what you said though.
He's right.
He fine a lie though.
I'm just saying.
He has not told a lie. If you don't know anything about Bleeding Kansas, head to Google immediately because that is OMG. That has to do with the Kansas-Nebraska Act and whether or not it was left up to the people to decide if it was a slave or a free state. And people went ham in Kansas, and basically, the abolitionists, the free staters, sort of versus the pro-slavery people, and they were trying to sway everybody to their camp, and it was basically like Game of Thrones meets Boardwalk Empire for like 10 or 15 years in the state of Kansas.
She's not lying. She's telling the truth, y'all. Nika's preaching right now. Y'all don't realize she's preaching. She's preaching. Yeah. That to me, like, in researching that, it was really breathtaking, honestly, because I have no family history there that I know of whatsoever. But I started researching that area, actually working with someone else. Shout out to Janicia Swanigan and her family. But the thing that would just bug me out was just how much like gun battles and fights and things that were happening in the Black community. Initially, as Nika was saying, fighting against slave catchers and things of that nature. I mean, folks, hey, kill or be killed, but that generated a lot of documentation. When I was out there, I spent a good amount of time at the Richard Allen Cultural Center in Leavenworth, which was a great resource. And also, too, let's remember, post-Civil War, this is also the area where the Buffalo Soldiers are coming out of also. And so a lot of documentation also been produced there as well, if anyone's looking for research. And I was just about to mention Bernice. I see she just jumped on here. When we start talking about pension files and stuff like that, that's, I'm sure if you have any relatives there, that's a great resource if they can't pass through that area, for sure.
Yeah, I would. We're going to definitely talk about resources a little bit later, but Kansas, especially if you have the story of the Indian princess, I would highly suggest, in particular, some parts of Missouri as well, but I would highly suggest if you have the quote Indian princess story or a Native American nation story, and you maybe perhaps cannot find somebody on the Dawes roll or some other roll or something like that. But your family came from Oklahoma at some particular point in time, I would highly suggest looking in southeastern Kansas for them. Especially after the time after, the Civil War, 1900s, a lot of folks went up into that region, Fort Scott, Coffeyville. Am I forgetting any cities? Of course, Kansas City, Leavenworth,
Lawrence.
Lawrence. It's a lot of little locations.
Yeah.
In addition to the Exodusters,
Mhm.
which that was a whole other separate migration of folks into that region as well. Miss Angela, you have something to add? Because you had your hand up like you were about to say something.
Yeah. I wanted to just add, particularly because of the fact, even during the Civil War, you had almost a flurry of people coming from both Creek Nation, Muskogee Creek Nation, and the Cherokee Nation who fled into Kansas. A portion of members of the Creek Nation who wanted to avoid the Civil War conflict, particularly led by Chief Opapaleahola, who fled into Kansas with other Creeks and with his slaves. And you had also people who were in Kansas, also from the Cherokee Nation. Many of them, in fact, after freedom came, many of them were still left in Coffeyville, those communities, Ponca City, those communities near the border of Kansas and Oklahoma. And some still, in fact, have families there, many who did eventually come back into the territory, into Indian territory, and settle and got land, but still had family living in Kansas. Also, of course, and as you mentioned, the Exodusters who were motivated and encouraged by, Benjamin Pap Singleton, and he, as well as Edwin McCabe, and the two of them encouraged migration into Kansas. And this was also part of the westward expansion. Kansas is, although yes, Midwest, America's breadbasket, wheat fields, but it was also part of the frontier. So you have amazing history, westward expansion, post-Civil War, and you have a little bit of spillover from Missouri, because you've got Kansas City on the Missouri side, which is the big city, and the smaller city on the Kansas side, which is Kansas City, Kansas. They're right across the river. But it was a destination during the war. After the war, the state was definitely a destination for people leaving parts of the Deep South. So, and are still there. Sedgwick County is just as full of people of color as are those communities near the Oklahoma border as well.
Absolutely. She just ran the whole litmus test down for Kansas. I think Miss Angela definitely did it justice. We want to also make sure we welcome Bernice Alexander Bennett, who's just joined us.
Hello, hello. And I just want to mention something, because Angela already said something about the Exodusters, and this is a book that individuals may want to pick up. And it's about the whole Black migration to Kansas after Reconstruction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm telling you, there are some awesome records there. One of the things you have to remember, especially with the Exodusters, is you can't assume that everybody who left and went to those locations, like, parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, sort of the plain states, that they stayed. A lot of people went back home. And, when we start talking about records and resources later, I'll definitely talk about one of the ways that I found out that folks actually went back home was because of stuff that was actually on the Kansas State Archives website. So let's move to Missouri. Linda, why is Missouri critical to people of color research?
Missouri is critical because a lot of people were leaving the Deep South, going north, and especially from Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, heading north, going to Indiana, going to Illinois. So it's very critical in research because this was a stopping place. we'll get into the records part later, but this was a central location for people that was trying to get away from the Deep South in the Jim Crow era.
And something else that I like to point out to people, because sometimes I think Missouri has eclipsed this, is the fact that Missouri was a slave-holding state.
It was a slave-holding state that began around 1720 with a French entrepreneur, Philippe Renault, who brought in about 500 slaves from Saint Dominique to work in the lead mine. So that it was a slave state, and then later on it became a little smaller in scale, but majority of the slave owners in Missouri had moved here from North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about Minnesota and people of color research. Why is that area in particular critical? Cricket.
Because we were there.
Exactly. Because we were
it
there.
still has to link to jobs as well. And isn't Minnesota the state of 10,000 lakes?
Absolutely. So if yes.
Yeah, and I gotta go back to the migrations and same thing like she described for Missouri and even Kansas and Iowa. You know, I think that Minnesota isn't any different, but I think the major population there, isn't it Swedish? And I'm not sure Dutch, but I think it's Swedish. And I don't know what industry comes with their culture type thing, but I'm just wondering if there was any connection to that as well. I mean, I have family that lives there that's African American and European, but they, you know, it's like in the last 20, 30 years, not anything back in the 19th century or, you know, 18th century or anything like that.
My folks are also recent transplants during the Great Migration. I would definitely say too, in terms of these locations, as well as in particular Minnesota, these were spots that people were sent on reverse freedom rides as well. So when you're talking about migrations, also think about the fact that it's not that many people, but there are quite a few people sent by white citizens councils out of the South to locations such as Minnesota, as well as other states that were deemed white, as a way to sort of, you know, all the folks coming down from the North, integrating facilities and whatnot in the South. White citizens councils would actually send Black people back to those white locations, sort of as like an exchange. Really something interesting. All right, who is tapping? Somebody is tapping. Okay. All right. So in terms of what has everyone's experience been when it comes to researching in these particular states, right? We talked about a little bit about Iowa, some of the resources that are available, and you know, some of the records and resources and stuff that are there. But, you know, in terms of, like, I can speak for Kansas. Kansas has amazing records. I just don't think a lot of people realize it.
Well.
And sometimes I feel like we, you know, I don't know, I think Kansas gets overlooked quite a bit. But in terms of researching, let's just jump right in, because we spend a lot of time talking about critical record sets. When you're researching in Iowa, Michelle, what's critical for Iowa?
Well, when I was looking, the first thing I went to was the Wiki on Family Search when I was tracking that migration, when I found them in 1900 in Illinois, and then to find out where did they go, and then thinking of that occupation, and then I had to research the state because I didn't know where they had went. And so then, again, made contact with Tim several years ago to say anything in Iowa, because they were listed as coal miners in Fulton. That opened it up. And then the normal census, population census. Now, I do want to share that Iowa had a state census. And I know they had, well, the federal one in 1900, but then 1905, they had a state census, 1910 and 1915. And that was the time frame I was researching. So it was able to help me narrow down a time of death within a 5-year period, you know, to start looking for a death record of my great-great-grandmother.
And 1925, Shelley.
And 25. Yeah, well, she died between 10 and 15. And
Okay,
so
so you didn't.
and then they all left, the ones that lived, and went to Kansas. So, you know, so then I had to switch and go to
Like
Kansas.
it's ping pong, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I like the Wiki on Family Search first to find out what records they have recognized. And then, of course, the local historical societies. And this family was African American. So then I searched for the museum and then contacted them, received some books that they had to document during that time frame. So they've got some great records, and their archives was good. So the state archives.
Okay. And definitely checking out, you know, this is something I think a lot of people overlook. And I'm just going to share this for this one particular state because, as I mentioned, folks, I don't think enough people do this on Ancestry in particular. When you search, most people search from the main page. Not enough people actually will go to search and then, you know, all collections, and then go to the state specific page just to see what's available.
Yes.
To you. And I think that, you know, I don't think I've mentioned this in a while on the show, but I think it bears repeating to just go and browse and see what's available for a particular state before just putting, you know, stuff in. I mean, if you know that you're looking for a probate that happened after 1997 in Iowa, well, it's not going to be on there.
Nope.
So, you know, I just say this to say, you know, also look at the number of databases that are specific to a particular county in that, you know, location, and do maybe direct searches there. I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out to everyone because that's something that's often overlooked, you know, when folks are beginning their genealogy research. When it comes to Family Search, there are 22 different databases on Family Search when it comes to Iowa at this particular date. Some of those with large record counts include state censuses, like Miss Shelley was saying. That's something that's unique to Iowa. Of course, Kansas has them as well on those same particular years, you know, that are off, you know, in between the federal census years. You've got county births to 1935. You've got marriages to 1934. Several types of records that are available for Iowa. And let's move to Missouri and let's talk about critical record sets for Missouri.
Critical record sets, one is becoming my favorite is the marriage and death records. That's on the Missouri digital website. Also, NARA is here, the National Archives for the Military and Civilian Records. Those are here. The Julius Hunter African American Collection, that's at the library, that has a wealth of information. Also the newspapers, as well as the census records. And as Nika mentioned, for Family Search, clicking on the Missouri page for that one. The Missouri History Museum has a lot of records. We have a ton of records here for St. Louis. And not only that, in addition to newspaper, church records. So there's a lot of historical churches here. So there's records for those as well. Those are just some of them.
And if I can add, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Missouri's proceedings for like the Reconstruction, post-Reconstruction era are impeccable regarding like membership and death records and stuff like that. And you can actually get those at the Iowa Masonic Library, so that actually melds in 2 states in one, right? So that's another great resource also, because Missouri's records are excellent.
And for Missouri, is it similar to like what it is in Louisiana, where, you know, a lot of like the vital records databases are primarily focused on like New Orleans? Is it like they're primarily focused on St. Louis, or is it sort of like the entire state, or is it just St. Louis?
No, for the death and marriage records, that is for the state. That's on the website. I think I sent that link. Digital records.
You know, I already got a bookmark. That's one of my If you are not using sos.mo, forget what the URL is. Let me go ahead and share it so you all can see it. sos.mo.gov. I love this site, but in particular, I like the records in the archive section, and they've got Missouri death certificates to 1966, and this is not an index. This is the actual certificates are available on the state archives website.
And I'm one of the archivers.
Oh, well, that's new information I was not aware of. Also, I also fell into the state penitentiary database. I don't know how I got there one day, but I did. So sometimes I think people overlook the state archives website because they think automatically doesn't have very much, right? I think people think that maybe some websites have more than the state archives. And to me, in my experience, I've actually seen where state archives have more than what is online. That might be purposeful. So I would definitely admonish everybody not to overlook state archives websites, in particular when you're looking at the state of Missouri and when it comes to vital records. All right, so moving forward, let's talk, let's see, there are 18 collections for Missouri on Family Search. So you've got deaths. Those are browsable. Those are not searchable like the state archives. So that's something to put out there. There's territorial censuses that are there. I would say largest record set that's there are this Civil War service records. Something else that I noticed that was awesome in Missouri were the separation notices. I don't know if a lot of people know about these, but the only reason why I found out about it is because I had a family member who separated from the military in Missouri. Those are on Family Search, and that's just separating themselves from the military. There are a ton of resources on Ancestry as well. So definitely can't overlook those. All right, so let's move to, did I skip over Kansas? I think I did skip over Kansas on accident. Kansas records. Awesome. Okay, let me go through. If you don't have a pen, I highly suggest you get one because I'm about to start rattling stuff off. So Kansas is a gold mine. If you have a family you're researching that just put their pinky toe in Kansas, still look for them. Kansas in particular, as I mentioned, just like Iowa, has a state census several years. I mean, this is going all the way until I want to say they're 25, but then if your family lived in Kansas City, Kansas, they also had a city census.
Wow.
A lot of people don't. Yes, ma'am. Gold mine. Show me my coins. Give me some love in the comments if you did not know about this. Yes, ma'am. If you did not know, if you have family members who were in KCKS, right? Difference between KCKS and KCMO, right? Because one's in Missouri, one's in Kansas. Kansas has a state. They have a state census, but they also have a census that was just for Kansas City. And let me show you, I'm literally going to pull up my tree so you all can see the number of census records that I have just for my grandmother's brothers. It literally is every single year. It includes the number of people in the household. Some of them are just a number. Some of them are actually just the head of household. Some list all the people who are in there. Oh yeah, here we go.
I wish we had the prayer cloth for Mika, because when she falls out, somebody needs to lay the prayer cloth over her. Falls out.
I'm just trying to gang people up. Okay, so this is literally my tree. This is my great uncle, and we've got federal census of 40. We've got 42, 46, 48, 49, 50, 52, 53, 54. You see, I just keep going down, 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 down. All those years are available up to the 60s in Kansas City, Kansas. So if you have not searched, that will be on Ancestry. Do not click $200. Do not pass go. Head to Ancestry for that. Now, let's bounce back. Also, newspapers, Genealogy Bank. They've got great papers for Kansas City, Kansas. They also have regular newspapers for Kansas. I would also suggest newspapers.com for this area as well. In particular, Fort Scott, Coffeeville, all those locations that are in Southeast Kansas. Look at those newspapers on newspapers.com. I didn't realize how much was there.
The Leavenworth Times is an excellent resource. Also, they covered a whole lot of stuff that happened in the Black community. Also, if you because as Nika mentioned earlier, we got the chance to go out there. We didn't go together, but we were both out there at different times. When I was in Leavenworth, we had the chance to go check out the Richard Allen Cultural Center. They had amazing research material there as well. And I actually found out the Leavenworth Public Library, they've done historical surveys of the plots of land and the building structures, where they've tried to create narrative history out of the buildings, and if anyone ever goes to downtown Leavenworth, in the different buildings, they actually have like little pamphlets of historical material of when the building was created, who owned it, who sold and bought it. And I mean, this was stuff. So I was basically going up and down the block, just collecting these little pamphlets. So I have like a whole little baggie of them here with me. so that was like a kid in a candy store, because I didn't know that when I first walked in. I went into a coffee shop just to get something to drink, and they had these pamphlets. And they're like, yeah, if you go to the next store down, like they'll give you another one. You get another one. So I just kept going. Like even the toy store had one. It was great. So
I agree. And again, I'm going back to Kansas City, Missouri, city directories, Kansas City, Kansas. Years on years on years on years on years. I'm telling you, if you're trying to track somebody, find somebody who was in Kansas City, Kansas, they are almost like, I'm telling you, search that city census, city directories, the newspaper. You're good. Also, if you have a family member that was in Kansas City, Kansas, and they went to Sumner High School, which has a huge alumni network, their yearbooks from the 30s, or no, actually I want to say the 50s, are online. They're digitized for free. Those are there as well. Trying to think of anything else. I mentioned state census. Yeah, Kansas is a gold mine. Oh my. Gold mine. I can't even explain it.
You mentioned the city directories. St. Louis have all of our city directories, not only digitized, well, they're on microfilm, but also in the library for every year as well. Also, we have the marriage records, the marriage license records for Missouri in the library. They go from 1804 to 1966 for the city, and then 1876 to 1980 for the county. Those are the marriage licenses.
Okay, and is that something that's online, or is this something that you have to
you have to go get it.
You have to go get it at the Kansas City, St. Louis.
Yeah.
Okay. And in addition to all these resources we're telling you all about that are online, Linda brings up a great point. Sometimes you've got to go to these locations and go and do research yourself, and not depend solely on the website for, or websites for the information. But we're trying to give you as much as we could possibly give you. Plus, the other thing is, if you have family that lived along the state line in any of these states, be sure to research on the other side. There's a possibility that they may have jumped locations, or maybe the boundary lines would have changed. That's why having geography down also makes a huge difference. Kansas marriages are on Family Search, a more than decent sized database. I'm trying to think of what else is on there. It's just, gosh, Kansas.
One thing I loved, and I know we're talking about Kansas. One thing I loved about the Missouri side, in Kansas City, Missouri, was the Negro Baseball League Museum. Like, that was like excellent. I didn't even know. I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know it was there until I was taken there. And I was just floored at how much material they had also on the Negro Baseball League. So that's something else to definitely check out if you're ever in that area, because you never know. You may have had an uncle or a granddad or somebody that was a pitcher for a year or two or something. You never know. So definitely check that out.
I was about to say that's something else that would actually be a really cool show. Have like a commingling of historical history from the perspective of athlete, and how to research your family members who may have been athletes.
That would be a good one. That would be a good one. I think me and Nika just we just birthed something. Boom.
We did. We still have time.
There we go.
This is a great time to plug the fact that we are taking suggestions for 2018. So if you have a show topic that you think we need to talk about besides Florida and Texas, because we know we haven't gotten to Florida and Texas, give us suggestions. You know, if you're in the chat room right now, it's a great time to do that. Hashtag us, tweet us, all that kind of stuff. All right, so let's move into Minnesota. I know my folks were on the north side. They also live on the south side as well, but there's a huge enclave of African Americans that live in that area. It seems like everybody knows everybody. That sounds horrible, but it's pretty much is true. If your family's been there for an extended period of time, they are going to know pretty much everybody. It was so crazy for me that I actually met somebody in the airport in Cameroon who knew my family from Minnesota.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy. So in terms of
International
Minnesota,
and locally respected.
I know, internationally known, locally respected. I know Pimp and Ken. Yeah, I got your lexicon. Ha, didn't think I knew that. All right, so Minnesota. Great records available online. One of the ones that I like to use a lot are the birth and death indexes for that particular state. They list the names of the parents. Something that you also should know about that is, and it really depends on the state. This is something to consider, especially when you have a index that's of that size, right? This one's got 11 million plus 11.5 million births in the birth index. I know that not all births for the state were included. In fact, the ones that I have found that are not are usually those between parents who are not married. Just want to put that out there. And it's consistent. Just want to put that out there. I actually researched that a while ago because I wanted to know. I was like, I have a ton of family there. Like, why are these births not in there? And in fact, I want to say I found it somewhere. Maybe it was a historical society website that alluded to this. So keep that in mind when you're working with Minnesota birth records. You got a death index. You've got marriages from 58 to 2001. So this state is actually coming out on top in terms of records available that are online that are more recent. So you've got marriages that have happened in the last, 16, years or so, births to 95, stuff like that. Anybody else have something else you want to bring up when it comes to Minnesota? Shelly, you're muted, but you're talking.
I want to mention that we should also not forget about checking the universities that might be in the states or around the location. And I just pulled up the link for African Americans in Minnesota for the Minnesota Historical Society. And so it looks like they got some interesting resources there as well. It's a small population. Like even right now, it's only about 2.2% as far as African Americans. So it's kind of interesting. But I would still hold that jobs and specific occupations would drive people, to the north and that cold weather that they have there.
Yeah, I don't know how my family does it. Like, I just really don't. God bless them, because no.
Well, they talked about, didn't Dred Scott and have something to do with Minnesota?
Okay, let me pull that up.
I'm looking at a description. The George Bonga was the first African American born in that region during the fur trade, and Harriet and Dred Scott, whose 2-year residence at Fort Snelling in the 1830s, later led to a famous, though unsuccessful, legal challenge to the institution of slavery. So
you're talking about Missouri, not Minnesota.
Nope, I'm talking about Minnesota, dear.
Are you sure?
I am looking right at the link I just put in there, Minnesota Historical Society, African Americans. There's a story of the African Americans' profound influence on the history and culture of Minnesota.
Interesting.
A book that came out in 2002.
Okay, so that was what I just pulled up. There was a separate link that Linda had shared for the Minnesota State Archive
I came
that
after
talks
that
about
one.
that talks about the Dred Scott case, and it's tied to Missouri.
St. Paul in Duluth, Cool. Very interesting. And it's interesting to bring this up on these certain states where, like you said in the beginning, most people don't think. African Americans were there, but I'm not sure I know of any states where there isn't at least something happen, or there was some involvement or some small migration on whatever level as far as in this country. I don't know if anyone's ever did any research on that, but you know, so far we haven't come across the states that we've covered that there wasn't African Americans in it, and early on in their history too. So find that very interesting.
I have a quick question. Does anyone know if there was any Underground Railroad activity in Minnesota? I was just curious.
That's an interesting question, and I think
I have to Google it.
That Google is our friend.
Okay.
And let's see. Very interesting.
I was just wondering because I never hear about that state, even though it's you would think with Canada.
Let's see.
I think there might have been.
Following the tracks of the Minnesota Underground Railroad, the Star Tribune.
That's the paper.
Done.
Yeah, I was also going to say, you just reminded me saying the Star Tribune, their archives are on newspaper.com.
Oh, excellent.
Newspapers.com. So, yeah, so that's pretty recent. They've got some great stuff. That's
yeah, it looks like a Joseph Farr in 1895 talked about at the St. Paul Pioneer Press about memories of the Underground Railroad. He was 18 years old. So yes, I don't know all the involvement. I'm just glancing through what's on Google. So it looks like something interesting. And the churches, wait a minute, the Minnesota churches. Did you see that? Yeah. Minnesota churches will be anti-deportation immigrant sanctuaries. And so they're talking about, I'll give you that link, Nika, instead of reading it. And PBS has something on the Underground Railroad that mentions Minnesota.
Cool.
Okay. We actually haven't done a show on the Underground Railroad.
We should. We should.
Really?
I got some family connections.
Me too.
Yeah. We actually have not. I was going to say we haven't done one, so that would be a great suggestion.
We haven't done one? Seriously?
No, we've never done one on the Underground Railroad.
I wish I had the little question marks above me right now. Like
I know we covered. There's only so many shows.
We did the slave narratives. That's what
we
it was.
did slave narratives. We did free people of color. We don't. Yeah. So maybe that's next Black History Month series. Bernice just chimed in with homesteaders. So that would probably be, in our Black History Month series next year. Be Underground Railroad homesteaders. Trying
that would
to think,
be cool.
Maybe exodusters. Maybe the people on the fringes, right? Or that not as, all that kind of stuff. So, all right. Well, we hit quite a few resources tonight. We know we went through these quickly. If you want to, maybe if there's something that you missed or perhaps something you think we forgot about, whatever, be sure to leave your feedback in the comments. You can tweet us as well at BlackProGen, hashtag your comments, BlackProGen. Maybe maybe you need a link, whatever it is, feel free to rewind. A lot of people don't realize, and this is tip, I've been giving you guys game tonight. Did you know that you can rewind the broadcast as you watch it? Yes, you can. So if there's something that you missed that we said, take the little YouTube, the little icon, the little circle, and just go, and you can rewind the show as you watch it. And then if you want to catch up to where we are, you literally could just drag it back to the end and you'll get right back to where we were. I didn't realize that until I watched somebody else doing a YouTube live. I was like, can you rewind? And you really can rewind. So if you missed something that we said, feel free to go back and rewind and see what we were mentioning. So if there are no other comments or anything, we've got a lot of stuff going on in the chat room. There are folks who are definitely researching this area. Denise Muhammad mentions public libraries in terms of them having great digital collections. Perhaps that stuff is overlooked. I definitely think so as well. We've also got, let's see, there's a lot of folks chatting, a lot of comments. Valerie Lisk mentions Missouri has state census for a few counties. Some counties have Afro-American marriage records for slave families listing their children by name and ages. So that's definitely something to look into. We also have comments from, let's see, Oh gosh, there's a lot of comments here. Oh, Monica S says, I just heard you mention Texas. I know tonight is about the Midwest, but please do Texas. I can't wait for you all to tackle that huge state. Absolutely. All right. So thank you, chatters. Thanks so much for being a part of this. And right now it is time, without further ado, for our next segment, which is Ask Mariah. What do you think Ask Mariah is? Well, if you haven't watched the show at all, Ask Mariah is the time where you, our viewers, submit your questions, queries, conundrums, any of that stuff to us, the panel, and we will answer your question, attempt to give you assistance and whatnot live during the show. This is the time where, you know, folks who, especially now with the new ads that are coming out for Finding Your Roots, folks who want people to come and do their genealogy or answer their questions live. Well, here's your opportunity to have that done for you for free. I always have to remind folks that our panel never sees the question or the query before the show, just so potentially if people think that, you know, that we've worked this out ahead of time. No, actually we have not. We're actually sitting here thinking on the fly, you know, answering the questions together as a cohesive group. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our panel to our question asker. And that is Sharice Louie, who's actually in the chat room. She's been in the chat room the whole night. So thanks so much, Sharice, for joining us. Her question has to do with finding the father of her biracial second great-grandfather, Anderson Moore. So we're looking for her third great-grandfather, who is, of course, the father of her second great-grandfather named Anderson Moore. And in terms of the information that Sharice has discovered, she's got several census records beginning in 1870, all of them in Holmes County, Mississippi. She's got an 1870, 1910, 1920, 1930 in Holmes County, Mississippi. She also has a will that she found on Ancestry. And she's taken several DNA tests, including Ancestry DNA, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, and MyHeritage DNA. All right, so that's our case for tonight. We've got 1870, 1910, 1920, 1930. We also have a will found on Ancestry, and we've got several DNA tests that have been taken. All right, panel, before you ask and jump in, because I can already see you guys going, because we don't have date of birth, we don't have date of death. So keep your arms down, folded nicely in your laps. So the first question I have for Sharice is, what is Anderson's birth year? Because we don't have a birth year. And it looks like Tony is already looking, because she's got that Tony look in her face.
Yeah, it's about 1862.
Okay, so the reason why I asked that question is, if he has a biracial father, I just wanted to know approximately when this third great grandfather was born, because then that would, exactly, Shelley's commenting, that would then potentially let us know if he was born enslaved or if his father was born enslaved, which in this case, it appears as though if you know that his father, she says, I would like help in finding the father of my biracial second great grandfather. So that means that Anderson Moore's father was oral history has said that he is white.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
Does the oral history actually say his father was white? Because she said he's biracial, but I want to make sure that.
How does she know?
Yeah, because he could.
How does she know that?
All right, so she's answered. He was born about 1862, and he died in 1939. And apparently, Sharice is a catch-all for DNA because she is Shannon Christmas's cousin and she is Teresa's cousin.
Wow.
I know the average person would be like, well, just have them do it. But
Well,
no, we don't do that here.
Shannon is related to my family as well. So, small world.
Wow.
Let's see. All right. Teresa has a link. I'm going to go ahead and put, or sorry, that's Tony. Wrong T.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm looking at this 1870 census, and it's rather strange for them. And I'm hoping, Nika, that you can pop the screenshot up there.
Yes, ma'am. Give me just a second.
Sure.
And you know, she didn't have 1880 and 1900. That's a
Right.
huge,
That's
huge
a
gap.
40-year gap. I mean,
It is a big
wow.
gap. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
suggest searching the family search collections for Mississippi.
And see if
to
there were
see if you
state
can
census
fill that.
also.
To see if you can fill
Has,
that gap in.
Okay,
has she
so
been able to answer the
can,
question about
yeah,
how he
yeah,
was biracial?
Okay,
yes,
there's the
yes, she
Okay.
has. She
there's the
has. So let me
1870.
answer that. Let me pop this
Yeah.
up to everybody first.
Yeah.
Let's start with the answer to the question. She
Right.
says that let's see, my aunts and cousins have told me. So in terms of her aunts, this would be their great grandfather, right? So they're a generation closer. So aunts and cousins who potentially could have been grandchildren or great grandchildren of Anderson mentioned this to her. So this is oral history that this was passed down. So we're looking at the 1870 census in Lexington,
Right.
Holmes County,
Right.
Mississippi.
Now
And
check that out. If you scroll down to Anderson, where
yes,
he is, for some reason the census taker enumerated him and Richard
Yeah.
in their own
Together.
household. And I noticed I saw a few trees from researchers on Ancestry who were looking at this family, and it seems like there were a lot of children in the family. And, it's very possible that Anderson and Richard were actually in the households of other family members. So I wanted to ask Sharice if any of those other people on that page are family or known to her. Because right there above, there's David Hooker,
Morris.
and he's 49 and with a wife, and then there's
Morris
Ross
Moore that's up
Look
here
at
too.
Morris Moore.
Yeah, right. And he says he's born North Carolina. And also I would ask if if she's getting, since she's had so many of the DNA tests, if you're getting any results for European American named more or otherwise, because on Ancestry, again, a few of the people who are researching this family seem to be identifying maybe a Samuel Moore as the father of Anderson.
Okay, she says based on her research so far, let's see, I got to go back because she's commenting as we're typing this. So she says in 1870, he's in household with only a child. I searched for him in 1880, and she puts 1890 and can't be found. She says, I looked line by line for him in Holmes in 1880. And she says, they are not known to me.
Let me ask a question.
Can I finish? Let me finish. She says, they are not the people, other people, you all had asked her about the other people that were living around. She says they are not known to me. And I asked my aunts, they do not recognize those names. She also chimed in, I have several European matches on that segment, but none are going back to a Moore. My hypothesis that I was going to add in here was that I think on the 1880 census, perhaps he was listed under a different name. Or he may not have been enumerated, but I kind of am more wanting to lean on the fact that he was listed under a different name. I wonder if she has looked for Moore Richard instead of Richard, or I'm sorry, Moore Anderson instead of Anderson Moore, because it's two surnames.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's two surnames. So I would wonder, are there any Andersons in Holmes County?
Yeah.
And whether or not that was a clue potentially left by his mother or whoever else about maybe an ancestor or something like that. She says that she's a cousin that's claiming Samuel Moore, and she put "but" with an ellipsis. So that was sort of like, I don't know. Now, Miss Angela, what were you gonna say? Go ahead.
I was going to ask, how did she conduct her search of him for 1880? Was she looking online? Because my suggestion is that I don't know where she lives, but she get herself to a library, pull out the Soundex on microfilm, and go through that county line by line. When you go to a digitized site, a digitized database like Ancestry, you type in a name, it pulls up that name, assuming that the person who indexed it could read it well, and it was indexed properly. But my point being that many times you are only looking at one page out of context. And I suggest doing the old sound X search, cranking the microfilm, because you are literally going page to page to page. When you're on Ancestry or Family Search, you're going from link to link to link, jumping around who knows where in that book of census records. Most people don't even realize census records, the original records, are in a huge bound book. And with microfilm, you literally have the entire book that is copied. And I suspect he can be found because there's a 40-year gap between 1817 and 1910. So
and
I think that gap is closed.
Yeah. And something else too is that because he was born in about 1862, the Freedmen's Bureau records for Mississippi are really robust. And there's also pre-Bureau records for Mississippi from when they were under Union Army occupation. And so there are a lot of Freedmen's Bureau records. And so often, for instance, on rations list, if Richard and Anderson were indeed on their own, if the census taker was correct, you know, you may find them listed on a rations list, because on the rations list, you find people who are either too old, too sick, or too young to work to earn their living. And so if you go to those pre-Bureau and Bureau records for Mississippi, and look for Anderson and look for Richard, you may find them listed somewhere there.
I would also suggest, and sorry to interrupt you, James, but when you're looking at pre-Bureau records, before you dive headfirst into searching for the Freedmen's Bureau on Family Search, please read through the descriptive pamphlet. I highly suggest that for Mississippi, because there are so many different record groups for that particular state. When Tony is talking about pre-Bureau records, that might be M1914. The rest of the state might be under something else. Look at those NARA and they're going to be at the for the most part, I'm sorry, those those records, those pamphlets are going to be at the beginning of the roll of microfilm that you're looking at online.
That's right.
But they don't always put them there because they chop the rolls up. So sometimes they don't include that descriptive pamphlet. So if you just put in NARA or National Archives M1914 or whatever it is, and the other thing, or I'm sorry, that'll pop up on Google. At the beginning of that pamphlet, it will tell you all other Freedmen's Bureau record sets or collections or record groups that connect to Mississippi.
That's right.
Don't overlook those.
That's right. And if you go on mappingthefreedmensbureau.com, we've got those linked in. We've got the descriptive pamphlet on the research guides page, Angela and I. And so both of those record sets, the pre-Bureau and the Bureau records, we have the descriptive pamphlets on the Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau site.
Exactly. Look at where the nearest field office was to Lexington. And depending on the location, that area is near Yazoo County or Yazoo City. So that might have been the nearest field office. You want to map where the nearest field office was, and using the Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau website is an excellent resource. Something else I was going to suggest, I'm surprised Miss Angela hadn't brought this up, is the Educable Children's Records for the state of Mississippi. Those are available on Family Search.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the only state that has that census. And it's years up until the 1900s. Well into the 1900s. Not every single year, but Mississippi, I know it starts around 1880 or so, or 1882, something like that. And actually a little bit before. And these are children who were certainly of age to have been in school, a freedmen's school of some sort. So they should certainly be captured in the Educable Children's Census of the state of Mississippi.
Yeah, I see a slew of Anderson Moore's. I just put his name in. It's 77 separate records on the Educable Children's list.
Yeah. And then the marriage records too for Mississippi for Anderson, for Richard may list parents.
Exactly. Danesia, she suggested going to the courthouse, which of course is always that can't be stated enough. Something else I would also add too is maybe if you can't get to Holmes County, but you can get to Jackson, go to the state archives. They've got a.
Did we lose Nika?
Uh-oh.
I think we lost her.
Oh,
We
hopefully
surely
she'll be
do.
back.
If you go on MDAH, which is Mississippi's website,
Yes.
they have records on there as well that are digitized.
Mississippi Department of Archives and History,
Right.
MDAH, right,
Mhm.
which is very, very useful.
Right.
One thing I was going to say also is that you can also definitely make sure that you're checking those church records as well. Especially if you know where he's buried or have an idea of what the family church may have been. You never know what can pop up in a baptismal record or anything of that nature as well.
Sharice is reporting that she found the family on the Mississippi enumeration of educable children's records, so she found the
Fantastic.
family there.
Oh, excellent.
Great.
Did she just find them, or
Wonderful.
she had found them early?
It looks like in the chat room she's saying she found the family.
And do you know if any of his children served in World War I? I don't know if that came out. I stepped away.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's been mentioned.
You know, based on the time that he was born and he died, and I'm just thinking of his kids. There might be something.
She's saying she had already found them on the records before.
Okay.
I just want to pause for a minute and acknowledge the fact that Nika was gone for like a whole minute and we didn't burn the show down.
Yep.
We just kind of kept going.
All I know is that my screen was like, nope. And I was like, nope. So then I had to jump right back in. Yeah, I froze up. I don't know what happened.
With the death at 1939, does she have the death certificate, and who was the informant?
Well, that's the other question something else I was gonna bring up about Mississippi. Unfortunately, Mississippi is not a state that has good death records available online or a very good death index. That's one of those things that you have to go to Jackson for.
But shouldn't she be able to find a? I mean, I don't know if a father's listed on there, but shouldn't they have a Social Security? Shouldn't he should be on Social Security index, right? Claims, right?
1952.
What about the applications for Social Security?
Well, sometimes those
index.
with the early, the claims index. Sometimes with the early records, they don't list parents.
Right.
Okay.
That's not always consistent.
And Bernice had a question. She can't unmute herself. She wanted to know if anybody owned land, because that would be another source.
Sharice is reporting that he had a farm and up until 1910, and it's still in the family. She's trying to find land records for him
In the county.
That is, she's going to have to go to the county or she's going to have to go to the Mississippi State Archives for that. Something else I would suggest is before you go to the Mississippi State Archives and before you go to Holmes County, you need to be clear on what they have on site. So that means in terms of the state archives, you're searching that card catalog to see what records they have microfilmed. I'd also do the same thing with Family Search to see if they've been made available. That's a topic we've been talking about more recently, the fact that they're kind of digitizing their microfilm collection at a frantic pace. The records that are in the state archives for the Mississippi counties were microfilmed by Family Search. So you're getting a duplicate set of records. So you may be able to do some research at home if you have a Family Search center, located near you and those records have already been digitized. But go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to add, because I know for Missouri, we have the Mississippi death index for 1912 to 1943 on microfilm. So in our library, so I was wondering if you check the library to see if they have it.
Yes, depending on
where does she live?
Location.
Where does she live? What state does she live in?
Do we have to ask her where she lives?
Well, I don't want her address. I just want to know what state.
She just wants to know.
Because there may be a library that I'm aware of or someone else is aware of that they can recommend.
I know we've never asked that question though, so that's what.
An episode on genealogy and privacy, and then here we go.
I didn't ask for her address.
We just
We
said her
make rules and
name.
we break them.
I know. Yeah, I was gonna say. Oh, genealogy Jen is saying order the microfilms before the end of the month. That isn't always
Absolutely.
consistent. No,
Yes.
let me tell you, that's not consistent because I went on today trying to order films and they said that they were not found.
That's because other
Even
people
though
done already
Other
snatched
people have
them.
borrowed them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Because how many counties do I have to go through to see it?
Well,
A
I
lot.
think another resource is the thing. Has she checked for the white people with the same surname in the same county and look for their wills and their land holdings? He's born in 1862, and if he is a slave, possibly he could have the same surname, you know, as someone that would have owned him. And I would also, when you guys pointed out about the census, and do any of those names ring bells on that 1870 census? I think she should start there and start working and looking at the white people and see if there's any connections in being able to pull their wills.
That's right. And
And
Anderson,
public records.
yeah, and Anderson being a bit of an unusual first name,
Yeah.
you know, you
Yeah.
can go through those probate records and see if you see an Anderson or a Richard, et cetera. I think one of the census records indicates that he also had a brother named Lafayette. So those are
that's right.
Those are two. And the other thing about that gap where he's, you know, from 1870 all the way up, it's very possible he was somewhere else. If he did come from a large family and,
true.
you know, could not rely upon his family's farm or his family's help, when he turned of legal age, you know, in 1880, he would have been, what, 18? He may have gone somewhere else to work.
Nika, can you see Bernice's post? She found an Anderson Moore who acquired land in Noxubee County, Mississippi.
Nuzube.
What is it?
Nuzube.
Okay. I only lived in Biloxi, so I don't know anything.
Hey, remember me in Florida? I was
Yes.
horrible in Florida, so that's all right.
So, but and the date is December 17, 1894. And so that's in the missing year range that he could have hopped, you know, just like we're saying. So she should do the bullseye thing, start at Holmes County and work every county all the way around it.
And this is on the Bureau of Land Management, which I just sent her the link for in the chat. I would also potentially do a reverse deed search if you get to Holmes County and see who owned the land. Look at the descendancy of who owned the land that he, you know, that's still in the family. That's a great resource just to track it back and see potentially it may be a family member who he bought it from, former slaveholder, of him, his parents, whoever. I mean, you know, he was born in 1862, so you know that's war was raging at that point. So there's a possibility that it may be tied to that person. Let's see. She says, yes, all of his family lived on his farm in 1920, 1930. My aunts recognized those names in terms of the folks who were living around them in 1920 and 1930.
I would study those families that were living around them in the 20s and 30s and see if were they in the same community in the 70s and 80s and 90s and what have you. If they were, that'll probably give you an idea, a little bit, if nothing else, just some idea in terms of movement to and from that area where they lived. Because I think that there's something there. I would also try and what was his name? Morris?
Morris Moore.
Morris Moore, who was a few households. He's 40 years old, and we're looking at two children on the same page. He is of age to have been the father, no guarantee that he is. But I suspect that if there's a relationship, there's a strong possibility that they may be in the same household in 1880. In 1900 and in some of those other years. And also with educated children, look at the subsequent years for that census, because on subsequent years after that 1880 year or entry, you see parents listed on some of those other census, educable children census as well, because they need to be identified. And I found an ancestor in Mississippi, Tippah County, on educable children, and he was 19 years old. This is 3 years before he married my great-grandmother. He was learning how to read and write, and this is 79 or 80, when he was 19 learning how to read. And so don't assume that, oh, well, they were too old, they won't be there. Look in those subsequent years for them, because I think there's a lot more to those Moors right around that same community.
So I would also add, there's a couple points I want to make. Young and Savvy Genealogist asked a question, which is a great question, but I just want to kind of sort of direct that conversation or direct the question a little bit more. But they're saying, does the county have their deed finding aid online? Many counties I've researched and are doing this now. And they say, if you go to the county website and poke around and Google the county with deed index, you might find it. Yes, that is true. But here's the caveat. We're talking about rural Mississippi here. A lot of locations, including the county I live in, do not have digitized records for searching for the general public. And if they do, there's a hefty fee associated with them that people who do land title research pay so that they don't have to go around to all these counties. So that's a great thing to do or to suggest. But in these rural counties, it's rare that's something that is available. And you are right. Many of the ones you've used have original pages available online as PDF. That's correct. But that's if they have the funding to do that. Not every county is like that, especially in these rural counties in the Deep South. A lot of them don't. Some of them do, but some of them don't. I've yet to come through or come across a lot of those.
Some are still sitting in boxes.
Hold on. Bernice asked a question. I was going to say, Bernice asked a question in the chat. She can't talk, so I got to talk for her. She says, does Sharice have a Texana Moore in her records because she is connected to Anderson Moore? And this is regarding the Bureau of Land Management land patent that you found, Bernice. Just shake your head if that's the case. Okay, so there's a Texana Moore that is connected to the Anderson Moore that Bernice found on the Bureau of Land Management website for a land patent in Missouri County. That's the link that I connected. I posted in the chat for you, Sharice. Okay, let's see. I want to go to who was going to talk next. I think it was either Tony or Shelly, or no, it was Linda. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Linda.
I was going to say, when you're researching the Delta, a lot of times those records aren't even in Jackson. You need to go to the county seat.
Yes. If
I'm researching Bolivar and I have to go to the county. They're not in Jackson.
Yeah, I have to research there too. All right.
She said, Sharice is saying in the chat room that Texana's Anderson is older than hers.
Okay, so it may not be the same Anderson Moore.
I'd follow that lead.
Yeah, I would say, and this is just, I think people in genealogy, we get too fixated on, I'm going shopping for this gold highlighter and I only want one that has Foothill College on it. That's it. But then sometimes we could actually get a blue one and we actually like blue better, and blue's the right color. I bring this up because we get entirely too focused and honed in on one thing to not potentially want to go down other avenues that might actually lead us to the correct result. So chase down the leads, go down the rabbit holes. As I always say, go shoe shopping. Just look around, see what you like. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. Go shoe shopping and research that other line down so you can rule it out. That's your exhaustive search.
Sharice is responding to you, Nika.
What is she saying? Okay.
She said, I saw Texana and became afraid that my great-grandma was an outside kid, as my aunt put it, but Texana's Anderson was older than mine. I found Texana more than once. Her Anderson was born in the 1830s and died before 1939.
How do we not know that Anderson is not his father, though?
I was going to say, daddy, daddy, daddy.
He's old enough to have been his dad.
Yeah, 39 to 62.
I'm just responding to her. You
Oh yeah, no,
listening?
no, I know. I'm reading her messages, but she's getting them. This is what we do at Maggie. When you sit around and we work your problem or your issue, we're going to be asking these same questions, because you got to remember, we're not steeped in this research like you all. We haven't been,
Yeah.
we haven't been researching these names for years. So we're thinking more out of the box.
No, stay
Sometimes.
in that box and keep digging. We're giving her resources to dig deeper and to expand inside that box. Don't go outside that box yet, Sharice. Stay in that box and
She
keep
said,
going.
get in that corner.
Yes, ma'am.
So she did. She just said, "I guess it's possible." Never thought about that.
See, yeah. So
She
I
has
wouldn't
to
rule it
cut
out.
loose of what she's been taught.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to fit by the perfect date, the blue pen, the white
Yes.
pen, the pink pen. It's not going to fit. The
No.
spellings aren't going to fit, and she might even need to do Morris Anderson for the man's name and not Anderson Morris or Moore, and go down that path also. But stay in that box and keep digging and exhaust that search.
I would look in the municipality that he's in 1870 as a child. Just look in that beat at all the Moors and try to research them to present or backwards, looking at Freedmen's Bureau records, on-site deeds, all that kind of stuff. When you go to the courthouse in particular, and I actually just showed this because I just did this, before I get any deed books out, I don't care. And I kid you not, it will take you at least an hour to do this. Write down every single Moor you see.
Yes.
Every single one. Doesn't matter. Because right now, you don't know if that person is connected to your family or not. It could be 5 years, 10 years, maybe 3 days before you determine that Moor is connected to your folks. But, don't just go to the courthouse and say, I'm looking just for Anderson Moore. No, you're trying to find out who his father is, right? And then you're also trying to find out maybe other family members that you may not know about. The other thing is, mine your DNA. Mine it. Look for patterns in surnames, locations, and pedigrees. Any repetition you see, for me, if I see more than 3 people with the same surnames, locations, and pedigrees, I note that as a pattern. If it's upwards of 5, 6, 7, 8, follow that lead. In particular, with your European matches, if you're trying to verify this claim, if you don't have a parent tested on that particular side of the family, who was the source of Anderson, you need to get them or another elder family member tested so that you can separate your results out. So you know that anybody who matches you and that family member are connected to Anderson, and that your DNA is coming from him. That's something that needs to be done. Angela brought a great suggestion in the chat room, which is something I'm surprised we didn't think about this. Have you searched for Andy Moore? I think that's great. A great suggestion. I would do AND, the asterisk, and Moore, in Holmes County, and also on Ancestry. When you're looking under the location, don't forget to check that exact and nearby counties for your search. Don't just limit it to Holmes County.
Bullseye method.
Yeah. Because we don't just want to assume, well, his name's Andy Moore, it's got to be spelled right. No. All right, one last thing. Let's see. Bernice says text Anna may be a family name. If she's seeing several with that name, do a first name search for Texana. She may find her pattern. I have a Texana in my family too, but it's like an intermarriage. Not the same thing. All right. We've given you 6 years worth of homework. We've given you 16 years worth of homework. So you have to come back to us. Let us know what you found, what you discovered. If you take a research trip down to Holmes County, actually just drove right through there about a week and a half ago. Let us know what you find. If you want some help getting prepared to go to the courthouse, definitely reach out to me, reach out to Linda. We've been to do courthouse research in the state of Mississippi, so we can tell you kind of what to expect. We actually, one of the first sort of YouTube lives that I did was on researching at the local level. So be sure to go way back to the beginning of the playlist to look at that particular video. Anyone have anything else before we move to current events? that you want to add in?
Societies. Check to see if there's a society down there that has records.
Okay. Good, good, good. All right. Well, this was our latest Ask Mariah session. If you have any questions, of course, Miss Bernice just threw up newspapers. I love how she just put that in there just real quick. Newspapers are important. Genealogy Bank, newspapers.com. Those are two sort of go-to resources there. Don't forget, if you are watching this, if you watch us work this case out live, feel free to send us your question, query, conundrum that you're having with your genealogy research, whether it's DNA, if you have a question about whether somebody is the daddy, 9 times out of 10, based on what we read, we might say, he ain't the Paul, he is the Paul. It depends. But feel free to send us your questions, whatever it is, and you may be featured next on Ask Mariah. All right, moving to current events. This one was an absolutely great one. We've got a story from the New York Times published on August 15th, 2017 that talks about Fawn Weaver. And the fact that she was on vacation, and she basically read about Nearest Green and discovered that he was her ancestor, and he actually was the man that helped or aided, basically was instrumental in defining the flavor, taste, all that stuff for Jack Daniels. And because of the fact that he was not in their museum in Lynchburg, Tennessee, she was the one that pushed for that. If you remember earlier this year, they were forced to quote unquote admit that that Nearest Green was behind their formula and all this kind of stuff. I remember there was a New York Times story that talked about it, and there was a photo that they had that they couldn't identify this black man, but they thought that might be him. Amazing story. She's coming out with a book, and this is number one reason why we need to tell our stories.
Yes.
Why do you all think that this is? Why do you think this is a great example as to why we should tell our stories?
Because you can clearly clearly correlate the work that Mr. Green did with a financial outcome that the Jack Daniels Brewing Company has been able to reap the benefits off of for years and years and years. And not only did they not properly compensate Mr. Green and his family for their, for the labor that he did, but he didn't even get credit for it for all these years. And people are running around talking about Jack Daniels this, Jack Daniels that, when in reality, Nearest Green, who's if you read the article, his name was actually Nathan Green. It probably should be his name on the bottle because he's the one who was their first master distiller, as they now in 2017 are admitting. But all these years before, you had people born, lived, and died, never knew that, but we're drinking this stuff.
And I applaud Fawn because she's the hero of the week, the month, the year. This perfect example of what I tell people is that we have to start writing our own stories and correcting the historical record. She has gone above and beyond with this story, tracking down descendants, going all over the Deep South. She's now looking to locate his grave. She's writing him back into the historical record, and that's a beautiful thing.
I agree with what Teresa just said, particularly because although we say tell your own story, here's the family that is not telling the story. She saw and recognized that, whoa, oh my gosh, this is a story that we all need to hear, that we should be telling. And the family hasn't told it. She has interviewed people who descend from Nearest Green and who, yes, oh yes, our great granddaddy, yeah, he did work for them. Oh yes, he did. He taught the man how, he taught Jack Daniels how to make to brew and age the whiskey and da. They were not telling it. It's the tenacity of this woman. And the family itself had not done it. And there is a tremendous lesson there. Thank goodness for this woman, because we would never have heard of him, although they've never denied it. Whenever she approached him, oh yes. Well, he did. He did teach him how to do this. Yeah, oh yeah, he did mentor him. Oh, but where were those who also descend from this man? We have to actually, maybe it's an opportunity for us to teach others how to seize because this belongs to the Green family. And this woman has no blood tie to this gentleman. And yet she said, whoa, this is so important. And, you know, wow, what a lesson. And she is a model to follow and a lesson for us all.
Mm-hmm.
I
clearly,
go ahead.
I was going to say clearly, she's passionate. You know, I know I'm passionate when I write about my ancestors. Clearly, that sometimes people outside the family are equally as passionate to tell the story because they recognize the value of it. And think about it. When you associate Jack Daniels, you're not associating with anyone who looks like Neris Green.
Like us.
And now, because of her work, you know, when I see Jack Daniels, you know what I'm thinking? Oh, that was Neris Green.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's
some Neris whiskey.
We've got to be. I mean, if we're going to talk about this, we've got to be really transparent. Right. His family may have been scared to come forward with this, you all.
That's
like
true.
let's be real, because they you know, here you are, you've got this huge conglomerate, you all come out, you know, we don't know what type of situation that they were living in. They may have fled town because of this or that, or maybe somebody threatened. I mean, the first thing that makes me that comes to mind for me is thinking about Queen Sugar.
Well, the thing that was so ironic to me was in the article, it talked about how some of his descendants were actually working for the Jack Daniels Brewing Company, which again, you know, let's do that as a case study right there to show the divergent lines of, you know, of generational class and generational wealth, etc. You know, I mean, the way the article was written, like they made it, you know, it made it sound like a nice, you know, kind of happy ending, so to speak. But to me, it was kind of like, wait, they're working for the same company that, wait, what? you know, I mean,
well, and how was this different from the Georgetown project?
It's not.
I mean, let's be real. I mean, granted, it regardless of this, what I'm saying is, for some people, some of the story, some of the tapestry, some of the bricks that are part of the foundation of their family, they are fearful to share it because, I mean, that's the thing. Think about Henrietta Lacks and the fact that several people had come to and approached their family for years about telling the story. They may have defrauded them. They may have said they were going to do X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. And it took someone else to come in to write the book, to tell the story. And even still, there was still infighting. There were all these different things, right? And I agree, you know, it definitely is their story to tell, but, you know, there has to be that person in your lineage or who is connected to your family who has the intestinal fortitude, the knowledge, the skill to do it. And no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody does, they're going to make sure that they get it out. And not everybody has that.
Knowledge of the fact that, okay, our ancestor helped this man start this company, but it is an issue of social class. Oh, okay, he helped him get started, but it's still his company, and it's still us. Well, we still have a job, you know, it's still, you know, an issue of place, a social class, people in a certain place that must be kept in a certain place. Usually when it's someone who's left, and I know certainly you've probably had that experience going to Louisiana. I know Bernice has had it going back to Edgeville. I've had it certainly going to places in Arkansas and Oklahoma. When you've left and can come back with a certain skill set and confidence and realize you have an ability to tell a story and no one can stop your telling the story. But I know that fear. I understand that there's fear. Now, with Henrietta Lacks' case, did they really know that every medical school in the country had their mother and grandmother's cells? I don't think they knew that until recent years, that every doctor's been trained, you know, on their mother's, you know, infinite cancer cells. But I think the issue, though, of the story and maybe getting that courage to come back, and I'm proud of this woman. I'm just so happy she saw it as so critical. But I know what it's like to go back and to share a story where I've done research on people. I write about them on my blogs, and people will say, "Oh, I didn't know that. go to his church and he founded our church and he did this and this and this. Well, you know, hey, at this point it's yours to tell. It's your story. But yeah, it's fair, but it can still be, we've got to tell our story ourselves.
Agree. All right, moving forward, let me share the next current event. Let's see, I believe this is Teresa. Or no, I forget. I think Ellen shared this one. Touching briefly on this, when white nationalists get DNA tests to reveal African ancestry. This was in the Atlantic on August 17th. This has been a story, of course, that has been reported widely before this, but the situation in Charlottesville sort of amplified it again. And there's actually been sort of a study that's been done using the Stormfront website or message boards, combing that system, looking for responses to people who have been taking DNA tests who identify as white nationalists. And some folks in that community have determined, you know, they want to turn to DNA tests to let folks know, you know, to prove or disprove their Aryanness or their whiteness. And some of them have results that come back that are less than ideal. And so feel free to check out that news article so you can kind of see how it was very interesting to read, because when the, you know, researchers were talking about it, they talked about how folks would sort of comfort the people if they discovered that they were a person of color. They talked about how, you know, some folks maybe wouldn't post the results. I mean, it was just really interesting to kind of see the reactions to that. And then the last story we have for current events, and of course there'll be a lot of discussion about this, is that Portugal, this is from New York Times today, Portugal dominated Angola for centuries. Now the roles are reversed. And this was sent by Teresa.
Yeah, I woke up this morning. That's the first thing in red, and two things came to mind. One is that have the chickens come home to roost? So you have these Angolans who are rich off of oil money, going to Portugal, buying up things, property, real estate, and living the life. There's some level of corruption that's taken place where they're paying off Portuguese officials, etc. So, you know, is the chickens coming home to roost? And then the second question came up with, some things don't change. You still have elites profiting off the blood, sweat, and tears of poor people. And when you look in the past, and we're repeating the past, you couldn't have a slave trade without the complicity of African elites. And here we're seeing history variation on a theme. Are we not? That was just my thoughts this morning.
It's almost like a repeating itself.
It is. You came in and settled and did it, and then we came back and did it right back.
Which kind of makes you feel like, all right.
I know, but you know what? I mean, it's an interesting dialogue though, because a lot of other countries have come in and colonized places in Africa. So now that Africans have repatriated themselves back to some of these locations, you know, especially, you know, if they start to, you know, delve in some of the natural resources and other things, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how that dialogue sort of plays itself out, and whether or not, you know, folks on the receiving end now are going to react the way, you know, that folks have reacted, you know, going conversely. So, yeah. Wow. Well, that was our current events for this evening. If there's something that you want to draw attention to us to in terms of covering for the next show, feel free to tweet us, hashtag us, or comment in the comments section under the recording of this video. And let's go ahead and share information about the next show. Next time you'll see us is going to be in September, on Tuesday, September 12th, with Getting Started with Latin Research. We're going to have our two Latinas on hand, in addition to potentially anybody else that's going to, you know, go through the initial steps of, you know, getting started with Latin research. And people watching the show probably are like, I don't have any Latin connections. I can guarantee you that you do. I'm pretty sure that you do. You probably haven't searched your DNA results to see if the Dominican Republic or, you know, some of the other locations, Puerto Rico, Cuba, I could keep going on and on and on. If you have DNA cousins that have ties to those countries, I can guarantee you that you probably do. You just don't realize that you do. So, Don't forget to check us out Tuesday, September 12th, same bad time, same bad channel, with Getting Started with Latin Research. Also want to remind you, don't forget to check out the next episode of Research at the National Archives and Beyond, Blog Talk Radio with Bernice Bennett. This Thursday, she's going to be talking to our own Tony Carrier, along with Robin Foster, about the International African American Museum Center for Family History. That's this Thursday, August 24th, 2017, 6 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. The next iteration of the African Roots podcast will be this Friday, August 25th, 2017. You can get that at africanrootspodcast.com, or just subscribe to the Lowdown by BlackProGen. If you miss the podcast being posted, it'll get emailed directly to your inbox. Also, too, if you miss Research at the National Archives and Beyond, that will also get sent to your inbox if you subscribe to the Lowdown by BlackProGen. We also want to remind you, don't forget Mondays with Mert, as well as Wacky Wednesday with our good genealogy buddy, Dear Myrtle or Pat Richley. She has that each and every week. And I also mentioned the Lowdown by BlackProGen. Get the latest and greatest from BlackProGen in your inbox. Subscribe to the Lowdown today. Check the description of the recording of this and any BlackProGen live episode for the link. And if you have anything you want to tell us or any shout outs you want to do, whatever that is, be sure to follow us on Twitter. Tweet us at BlackProGen. Hashtag your comments, BlackProGen. If you've got news, you've got a blog, whatever you have that you think we would be interested in, be sure to hit us up on Twitter. Anything else before we go? You guys are all super quiet. Normally you have a lot to say. True. You've been manning.
I manning the chat room.
She's been manning the chat room. She's been everywhere.
I got something to say. TMT, the money team.
Floyd Mayweather. My Lord.
I'm just letting y'all know right now.
I'm not spending my money. I hollered because Kendrick Lamar was on Twitter, and I guess some rapper saw how much it cost for like ringside seats to the to the fight. It was like $200,000, and they were like, no.
All I'm gonna say is Floyd gonna make an impact on the McGregor family tree. That's all I'm gonna say.
I would hope so, but I just do not follow boxing anymore. I'm still not the person.
Boxing a sport. Floyd gonna make an impact in the family tree. Trust me.
Oh my Lord. Well, we hope so. Is it this weekend? It is this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Yeah, it is.
You can call me Saturday, but I ain't picking up.
Oh, I'm not watching at all. I'm so not watching at all. I think that's it for now. Just to let everybody know, there are a few shows that we had, or actually a couple shows we had in October that we moved from Tuesday night to Wednesday night in order to accommodate Finding Your Roots. And we also took a couple topics out of this year, two in October, and we're going to defer those to 2018 so that we can talk about Finding Your Roots. So we're going to have two shows in October. I believe it's October 11th and 25th, where we're going to talk about Finding Your Roots this next season, season 4 of the show. So get your watch on Tuesdays, and then make sure you check us out on Wednesdays to hear our debrief, regarding each of the particular episodes. So just wanted to make sure you do that. Don't forget to subscribe. Also set reminders for upcoming shows. I want to say we've got 7 left for this year. So be sure to check those out before we close on out. Anything else before I hit stop broadcast?
No.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We had a steady stream of viewers. We hope we helped you out in your research of Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, and Missouri. Don't forget to check us out again on Tuesday, September 12th for Getting Started with Latin Research. I'm Nika Smith, your host of BlackProGen Live. Thanks so much for joining us. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.